Ivy is an artist. She's a biologist. She works with me on my weekends at the Sand Bluff Bird Observatory. She did owl research, and she continues to do owl research helping me. And she's done a really amazing job with her backyard. She has a really small lot, so there's not much space back there, but she's managed to put together quite a nice backyard for birds and other animals that come to visit her yard. So take it away, Ivy.
As Steve said, I moved to Wisconsin in the early 90s, and previously I lived in Washington State for 15 years. And that's where I went to college and learned about the ecology of Western Washington. And I also worked for the U.S. Forest Service on a district and for the Forestry Sciences Laboratory. So when I moved here, my husband wanted to go to grad school at the University of Wisconsin. And when I moved here, I didn't know anything about the Midwest. And my daughter was a baby, and we just bought a home in Evansville. And I had never owned my own home, so it was an opportunity to landscape it the way I wanted. And this is my backyard driveway. And right here, this is cut plant. Cut plant's a native and good food plant. And so looking out my backyard, I have this little patio, and sometimes things just grow up in the most unexpected places, such as that morning glory. And you know, I just let it go. That's fun, right? And so you see, I planted in here where my dog is there, tomatoes in here mixed in with other native plants. I had a plan originally, but it didn't work out very well. So there you can see the yard. Not much to it, it's small. But that's actually pretty much the border of my yard. And then that would face you back towards the street. And then there was an old laundry pole there. So you can see the tomatoes mixed in, the vines. And that's looking in the back. And then I built a little trellis out of my neighbor's old fence. And in the back here, it's a small area where there's wood chips, and you can sit back there, no lawn. And then a small garden area where I have a grape planted, and pear tree, and hazelnuts. So there we are facing back that way. Many of the pictures that you'll see are taken from underneath that little canopy that I built. Okay, so these are some of the warblers. Well, all the warblers that I've documented in my yard over the years. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I was really amazed. So what do wildlife need? You know, they need food, and they need water. You can use feeders that you buy. This one's hanging outside my window, and in the winter I have thistle feeders out there, and I've had black poles right next to the window. There's a chickadee and purple finch. And you know, a friend gave me a bunch of flower heads, and I just stuck them in the post and tracked chickadees, and that's right outside my door. And then in the winter feeding, you can attract goldfinches with thistle feeders, nuthatches with peanut feeders. A lot of you know these birds, I assume. This happened to be a 2x4 that had holes drilled in it for bees, and this woodpecker decided that it was an interesting place to forage. I was ready to pitch the board because it was done, but it had leaned it against the post. So it was a pleasant surprise. You can put out oranges. You get an orchard oriole coming to your yard. Baltimore. Catbirds like jelly. Robins like jelly. Cardinals like jelly. And guess what? Tennessee warblers like jelly. That was a big surprise this fall. There he is, sticking his head in there. Another thing you can do, this photo was not taken in my yard. It was in my mom's yard in New Jersey. Took an old stump and threw bird seed in the stump. And so it made for a kind of a natural bird feeder. And if you like to take pictures, you can end up with some good ones. Not that these are, but there's an HY immature red-bellied. And we just had so much fun with this nuthatch. My brother now, he calls me whenever he hears nuthatches. He gets excited. This one was coming down the maple tree. And it was getting so tame, I took that with my cell phone. And I threw the sunflower seeds into the tree. And you can see it's picking at the sunflower seeds there. And then also attracted the red bellies, poking his head in the hole for the seeds. And they really blend in. It's pretty neat how camouflaged they are. There's the adult getting some seeds. So one of the things that I think is really underrepresented in most people's yards is structure. I collected wood that people were pitching, and I planted them in my yard. And those are kind of in they're along the hedge side of my yard, and they're underneath an apple tree. And the structure and cover provides places for birds to hide and look for food. It's common yellowthroat. And they really blend in. It gives them a lot of camouflage. This is an Hatchier goldfinch. I don't know if people can see it there, but it just blends in. And have you found the bird yet? So you notice how the dead leaves protect this bird. There it is, a young dove. And there's a young catbird peeking out of my elderberries. And they need cover because around the yard are Cooper's hawks. And this is one that was in my front yard. And sometimes the stumps are used for eating their prey. And this Cooper's has a house sparrow. It's eating in a stump in my backyard. It's a plucking post for a raptor. Or the same stump is being used by this house wren to probe for insects as it rots. Or it's using it, a stump to sun on and preen and maybe take a nap. If you can, try, what I found is really important is to leave as many dead trees if you can. If they're not close to a house or they're not going to fall on anyone, that's important. When I was working for the Forest Service, about the time I was in the early 90s, they started realizing that forests were lacking, the forests that they were planting were really lacking and dead and down. And they were looking more towards structure, and it was called new forestry. And my backyard is that on a really small scale. This was a log that Steve had that I put in my yard, and this woodpecker's using that log. And this is my hedge, which is now turned into more of a wild hedgerow than a privet hedge anymore. And this hairy woodpecker, there was another hairy woodpecker that it was dueling with, another male. The posture is more of an aggressive posture. But if you notice, there was also a native grapevine growing up in this hedge. And the birds really like that grapevine. They look for insects in it. And in the older branches, it collects dirt and debris. And so the insects really like it in there. And this one, I ended up putting grapevines on the old laundry pole. And this young woodpecker, this young downy, liked that. And that's that log, and he probably felt a little secure in there, so did this wren. And of course, we have to look out for cats. I try to keep them out of my yard, not always successful. So around my pond, I put in this branch, And this branch has 3 poles that stick up, and a lot of the birds use this. And they look around to make sure things are safe before they come down to the pond. They also use it to just hop between different locations, the hedge or a tree. This catbird was using it. It would fly in with nesting material and then land on that post, look around, and then fly on. It's the downy using it. Lots of birds like that. House finch. Cardinals looking down at the pond, the fountain. House wren. And inside, next to the pond, in the creek area of my water features, I laid down a lot of sticks. One of my friends came by and saw a stick in my pond, and she started pulling it out, trying to straighten things out. But little did she know it was strategically placed there. So there's chestnut-sided warbler. There are hostas back there, of course. Inside, I ended up having a lot of jewelweed that grew up this year, I think because it was really moist. And as it died back, the jewelweed provided places for birds to perch and hawk insects from. There's a Blackburnian warbler. And it's picking at leaves in there. You can see the leaves. So these dead leaves and dead twigs, all those light brown things are the remnants of the jewelweed. There's a red start using the sticks. And there's our Lincoln sparrow hiding again, hiding in the hosta. Magnolia warbler coming down to my fountain. Behind the fountain, I put in high bush cranberry. And just, you know, sometimes you can be disappointed when things die back. My high bush cranberry, I think, got a stem borer and died back, but then it came back again. So that's what it looked like this fall. And it looks, you know, you might be tempted to pull all that stuff out, but it really was important to a lot of the warblers that were fly catching, especially like myrtle warblers. That stump sits over the creek, and there were a lot of insects, little gnats, not biting gnats, nothing to worry about. But they used this stick that was poking up a lot to launch off of. And there it's in the apple tree looking around for insects. It's a little microhabitat. Nashville warbler doing the same thing, using the sticks by the pond. And a northern parula. And kinglets, oh, they love this dead stuff. And they love picking at leaves and exploring under debris. There it is again. I really had a lot of Tennessee warblers in my yard this year. They just loved it. They also, towards, as the flowers died back, they were hawking a lot of insects too and gleaning them. So a lot of people like to clean up their garden right away. I wait a while, but this goldfinch, young goldfinch, was waiting to get access to a feeder. And out in my front yard, you'll never believe this, there were kestrels nesting down the street from me in a church. And so I had kestrels sitting in the tree in the front yard, and they would often perch on this dead branch in the maple and beg. This is not my backyard, this is the church down the street. And here are the babies. Only one has come out of the hole yet. And so the other thing wildlife really needs is water. And I put in duckweed and some lily pads, and this is how I built the fountain. It's basically one of those 30-gallon tubs, and on top of it, I put cinder blocks, and then I laid screening over it so I wouldn't get mosquitoes, and then around it I put stumps, and I ran a little hose up from the pump and drilled a hole in a clay plant plate, and it came out there, and basically I had a dish for the birds. That's what it looks like. And those sticks all around there are really, really important for the birds. So if you look, there's a passel of cedar waxwings waiting to use the water there. Chickadee. They're pretty cute. They love water. And that's what the two ponds look like. You could put a lot, I use some ornamentals. You can put a lot of ornamentals in water, like elephant plant and Wilson's warbler using the little creek. And you notice the stones in the creek, it gives them something to grab onto. And American redstart. And robins love to bathe. And rose-breasted grosbeak. Now it's about to launch itself from one of those sticks down into the creek. And it just was having a good old time.
Mm-hmm. What's your liner there?
The liner was from it was from a waterfall liner that people sell. You can get them anywhere at any hardware store. And here we have a redstart moving down into the creek. You can see it jumping down the side on the left. And there he goes. The pebbles are in there to keep it shallow and to give him something to grab onto. And then I have another pond yet. This one, it doesn't have an electric pump, it has a solar pump. But I put cinder blocks in there, and I also put some plants in there. And you need to make sure you have something that the birds can grab onto. You don't want them to drown. That's really not tilted like that. So you can see them moving in there. And planted coneflower and snake root. And there's a spider wasp. And more bees. That's a native Monarda fistulosa. A couple of bees on that. Spider wort. This is lamb's quarters. I don't think it's native. A lot of diversity when you have syrphid fly. These are the spring bees that I mentioned on the bulbs that I planted out front. Gave them something to start off with. This is Agastacia, and this is an amazing plant, attracts butterflies. When I was at my mother-in-law's house in Omaha, I counted 7 painted ladies on one plant. And skipper on the Agastacia. Hummingbirds like it. This is taken in a wildlife area. All of you are familiar with milkweed. I just collected the seeds and put them in my yard, and it's helpful to the monarchs. And Solomon seal, the hummingbirds like the blossoms on the Solomon seal, and the bees. And this is sedum. Bees were attracted to the sedum. And this is an interesting plant, jewelweed. Jewelweed's a native impatiens, and the fun thing with jewelweed is when it produces seed pods, you can touch them and then they spring open. Mostly I thought of jewelweed when I collected the seeds as attracting hummingbirds, but I was really surprised to see some other animals on it. You can see the pods hanging down. Bees liked it. There are the seed pods. There's a couple of short videos that I wanted to show if people are still up to it, that show some of the cool things that I've seen in the yard. If you just sit still and watch, you'll learn a lot about bird behavior. These are the cedar waxwings courting, and it was so cute. They just jump back and forth and offer each other a seed. The first time I saw this was in my high bush cranberry. and go
So they
on.
never eat the seeds?
No, they just pass it back and forth. I don't know if somebody eventually eats it, but they pass it back and forth, and it's like, this must be courtship. So then I read about it, and I went, oh, okay. Just wanted to give you an idea. This is a Blackburnian, and it gives you an idea of how the birds use the wood that's placed around the fountain there. And for those of you who like warblers, I mean, those Tennessees are really feisty. They fought a lot amongst each other. A lot of white flies around there. And I think a lot of birds were hawking the insects around the pond. And especially the myrtle warblers, they were, you know, they'd take baths and everything, but a lot of times they were just catching insects. Or they would bathe and then they'd see an insect and fly off and catch it. Like that Tennessee just came down and grabbed an insect. There's the blackpoll warbler. Those of you who enjoy birds, I don't know how many, it's on. So I took, right up here, I took a file and filed that off so that the water would flow down. Black-throated green warbler, that was a score. And here's a Nashville using the creek that I have. Do you see how it moves down on the sticks and everything like that? And
What camera do you use?
oh, just a point and shoot Nikon. I think it's a 530 or something. I can't even remember. You see all the gnats? There's a northern parula. I zoomed out so you could get the full idea of how important it is to have this structure around the pond.
How long have you been doing this in your backyard?
Well, since I moved there, but I think that you could, you know, I've been learning. When I first started, I got the book from the Minnesota DNR, Landscaping for Wildlife, and I cross-referenced that with, you know, the catalogs, the seed catalogs and the Prairie Moon Nursery catalogs, and bought books on wildflowers and that sort of thing. And then it just kind of morphed into adding more wood. Not next to my house because I don't want the insects coming in the house, but the beds are lined with logs. When I find people are throwing out logs, I use them to line the beds, and that provides insects some place to live, and it also contains the leaves. This is really neat. This is the Tennessee warblers eating the morning glories. And here they are again. But you can see that it's interesting. They pry it open with their bill like an oriole. They were just loving the morning glories. It was spectacular. So they would come in for the water, but they would stay for the food. You know, some of the other warblers, like you can see, it's going to eat that blossom. They flock and they fly off back up into the upper treetops. But these guys, and wait for it here, my 21st warbler comes in on the left side. That Tennessee's eating the jelly. And I didn't even notice it until I looked at the video. And I went, oh my gosh, it's going to come in. And I just went, whoa.
So you leave jelly out all summer?
Yeah, well, yeah. This is this fall, actually. Oh, here he comes. A blue-winged warbler. That was pretty neat.
Does Phil have any limitations on what is on the books, what you can put in your yard?
Not that I know of. I never asked. You know, my front yard is pretty much, you know, you know, you have to respect your neighbors, so I don't want my leaves blowing all over. So I mulch them, and I don't really have any lawn. It's all shaded. So I mow my lawn out front, the front boulevard, about twice a summer. But in the fall, I try to ground up the leaves, and then I rake a bunch of them into that area where those logs are, and that holds onto them. So it looks neat because part of it is, you know, turned into little leaf mulchy things.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.